JJ the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. Let's talk about what Congress's intent was, I believe, and listening to those that are in Congress and what they're voicing now as it relates to the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP, specifically with the aspect that it's not income. So in the CARES Act, it listed specifically that the PPP that is received and then forgiven is not to be considered gross income. We know that the IRS has come out and has doubled down on this. I've got a number of videos related to this. I'm going to put a link to the video that is on point related to Revenue Ruling 2020-27, where the IRS indicated that you will have to make a tax adjustment for the amount of PPP that is forgiven, and it will be in 2020. Now, what was Congress's intent on that? Now, real quick, just so you know, in this video, I'm going to cover 8 other things from your questions and also talking with clients today about these issues. That's a little bit of the difference with me. My channel is that I'm a practicing CPA, and these videos are meant to, of course, help you, my wonderful subscribers, but also each one would be intended also for my clients. So you are hearing the same kind of advice that I'm providing to my clients. So subscribe if not already, turn on your notifications, and especially do that if you're already subscribed. So congressional intent, when you think back on the pandemic, we're back in March and we're shutting down. We've shut down at this point. CARES Act was passed March 17th. Scratch that, March 27th is when it was signed into law. Things were happening fast. They passed this fast. With that, I do feel their intent was that this was meant to be a hand up to businesses. The businesses that had employees, it was them working in essence like a conduit in keeping employees employed, paid more to point. So the PPP that was paid now, from the beginning, before the first dollar was paid out, I knew that IRS would say that we're not going to be able to deduct these expenses. My clients have known that from the beginning. We've planned for that. We weren't sure which year that would be. I'll let you watch the video. I'm going to link to this in the body here, where I talk through the aspect where the IRS has indicated that it be an adjustment in 2020. But Congress, okay, I do feel there's a great chance that, and I want to get your hopes up, this is a hunch, but I feel there's a great chance that Congress will, in the next stimulus act, rectify this or clarify it, better yet, override the IRS. Now, the IRS is just following precedent. I think they've been minorly punitive in capturing everybody to make the adjustment in 2020, only from the standpoint of then potentially allowing taxpayers who aren't aware of this, are going to be blindsided, to maybe have the option to do the adjustment in 2021 to then have more time to come up with any tax related to that. But there's 2 things, and I want to say thanks to Dapper Dave, who brought this up, and specifically related to Senate Bill 3612. Now, it's been sitting in the Senate in the Finance Committee since May 5th. So this isn't anything new, but that is a bill that directly addresses the fact that the person, business really, that got the PPP should be able to deduct those expenses, meaning whatever gets forgiven would not be then a tax adjustment being a reduction in those expenses or not able to deduct those expenses because it was from, in essence, free money. Again, a link to the video going through those 2 revenue rulings, going over that. We had an IRS notice that came out earlier in the year and Revenue Ruling 2020-27, and I'll put a link to that actual revenue ruling. But then today, it is just about midnight Central Standard Time in Oklahoma here, but it's still the 19th of November. But today, there were the two main ranking senators on the Finance Committee. One's a Democrat, one's a Republican. Senator Grassley and Senator Wyden indicated that this is not the intent of Congress and blasted, if you will, the IRS for coming out and doubling down that this is a tax adjustment like they had indicated earlier in the year, but also that it has to be in 2020. But overall, the senators were blasting, in essence, the IRS for doing this. But know this, the IRS is just following the law that they know and have interpreted related to other things. So blasting the IRS is political fodder. It's a good headline like I read. But nonetheless, when you have the ranking senators in the Finance Committee that are the ones that are looking at this, okay, that is good news because we know the sentiment of the Finance Committee in the Senate doesn't want to see that this is a tax adjustment. In essence, a adjustment that most likely will cause your tax to go up. Again, I've got a playlist talking about the PPP taxability, and I'll also put a link to that playlist, as I know there's a number of issues related to that. But that Senate bill, it was sponsored by John Common of Texas, C-O-M-Y-A. That Senate bill 3612, that in essence says, hey, this should not be a tax adjustment, is sitting in the Finance Committee where these two ranking senators, Republican and Democrat, are in essence saying, yeah, this is not our intent. So that's good news for us. And we'll need to wait to see what comes out of the next stimulus. Now, out of the videos that I've done in the last few days, so go to my video list. You can just pull up the most recent videos, take a look. I'm only doing videos when it really makes sense to put out good, valuable information. I hadn't done a video in about 9 days before that or so. So let me run through quickly 8 other items related to this. There's Revenue Ruling 2020-52 that also came out by the IRS at the same time as 2020-27. And 2020-52 indicates this in a nutshell, that if you make an adjustment and you reduce down your expenses in 2020 for your reasonably determined amount of forgiveness, and later you're determined to not have received that full forgiveness, it indicates that if you meet the safe harbor, there's a number of ways that you meet the safe harbor, and it's not that hard to reach the safe harbor. But if you made the adjustment, reduce down the expenses in 2020, and then later you have an amount of the PPP forgiveness that's not achieved, meaning you're going to pay some of it back, you can then deduct that in 2021 or amend the 2020 return. So it doesn't mean we get to pick either year. It's just saying that if you make the adjustment and later it's not all determined to be forgiven, then whatever you got to pay back, then in essence, you would be able to deduct those expenses, or you'd be able to reverse any amount of adjustment that you had made in the prior year. Now, someone had a question about this. The third item to go over with you today is that with the EIDL, we already know, I've got videos on it. I'll put a link to it. But if you got an EIDL grant, advance, same thing, it reduces down your PPP forgiveness. Okay, only the SBA does that. Now, we do know that whatever you got in the EIDL grant advance, it will reduce down your expenses. You don't pay it back, it's going to reduce down your expenses, and it's going to happen in 2020. That's the grant, $1,000 per employee up to $10,000. Not the EIDL loan, but the grant. But check this out. If you have a reduction in your PPP forgiveness for the EIDL grant, which if you got one, you're going to get that reduction. So if you got that reduction because you got the grant, the advance, you are going to be able to deduct the amount that you got to pay back. So let's think about this. You got an EIDL grant, $5,000, okay? You're going to reduce down your expenses $5,000, period, okay? Doesn't matter if you're self-employed or an employer, an S Corp, C Corp, partnership, Schedule C, Schedule F, you're going to reduce down your expenses for the EIDL grant advance. You're going to reduce down for the employers your expenses for the amount of PPP forgiveness. That's a S Corp, C Corp partnership. Okay, I've got a video on this. Check it out. For the self-employed, side note, you do not need to make a tax adjustment for the Schedule C, Schedule F filer that has no employees. You do not have a tax adjustment for your PPP forgiveness in any way, shape, or form because it was based on your net income. But for those that are having a reduction in your expenses, Schedule C exempt from this, so we're talking about the S Corp, the C Corp, and the partnership. You have a PPP forgiveness of $50,000. Okay, that's your calculation. Well, the SBA is going to reduce down that forgiveness amount if, in this example, you got a $5,000 EIDL grant advance. So you got $50,000 potential PPP forgiveness, but the SBA reduces down that forgiveness amount by $5,000 for the EIDL grant. Therefore, you only will reduce down your expenses $45,000 because that's the only amount that actually got forgiven. You're going to reduce it down for the $5,000 of the EIDL advance, but when you pay back the $5,000, that then releases you from having to make the tax adjustment. Another way to look at it is you get $50,000 on a PPP loan. You get $50,000 forgiveness before the EIDL grant adjustment. Therefore, only $45,000 is forgiven. You then have a $45,000 adjustment to your expenses for the forgiveness amount. You have a $5,000 adjustment for your EIDL grant. That's a $50,000 adjustment reduction of your expenses. So don't allow yourself to inadvertently have a $55,000 adjustment. You're going to put in a PPP forgiveness application to the bank that then goes to the SBA. The SBA is going to be the one that makes a reduction. But when you're looking at your PPP forgiveness application, you're going to calculate if you got full forgiveness in this example, $50,000. The bank's going to say, yep, it's $50,000. It's the SBA that reduces that down. So don't end up making a $55,000 adjustment there. Play that back if you need to have that restated to you, but nonetheless, that is something that you want to take note of. All right, I'm going to buzz through the rest of these. The fourth item, if you have a fiscal year end, so let's go with June 30, 2020. We know that out of the revenue ruling that came out this week, 2020-27, it indicated that you reduced down the expenses in 2020. But more to the point, what the revenue ruling indicated is that you're reducing it down in 2020 because that's the year that the expenses were used, paid. So if you have a fiscal year end, then you're going to look at it and go, well, then what were the expenses paid that achieved PPP forgiveness in fiscal year end ending June 30, 2020? And then the adjustment for the next fiscal year, which would be June 30, 2021, but that's the next fiscal year. Okay, it would be during 2020, the first half of the next fiscal year. But bottom line is that when you trying to figure out, well, what year are you adjusting with the fiscal year end? It would be based on the expenses that were paid during that fiscal year end. So there most likely will be a split between the 2 years, not to be interpreted as now there's a way to do it in 2021. Now, if you're on the accrual, it would be based on when that expense was incurred, if you will. Now, the next item, the fifth thing, how do you book this on your financials and in QuickBooks, the PPP adjustment, the EIDL grant adjustment? So what we've done is instead of it showing as a liability, even though we know right now it is a liability in reality until it's forgiven, we've just gone in and made an adjustment on 12/31/2020 to reduce down the liability and then pick that up as an adjustment on the P&L. It's a negative expense. That's how we've done it. So we would be debiting the liability and crediting other expense. Yes, normally you don't credit expenses, but you credit Other expense, we're doing it as a bottom line other expense. We're not wanting it to be netted out so that it sticks out like a sore thumb. It's a negative expense. So when we're doing the tax return, we will not be showing that as a liability on the tax return. The balance sheet, if we're doing it tax basis, it will be the adjustment. If you have books and you want to keep it there as a liability for your purposes of your financials, you can, and you can show it as a liability, but then there'll be an M1 adjustment that would be, in essence, you showing that here's an amount that's being adjusted on the tax return that has not yet then been adjusted on the books. Nonetheless, we're just keeping our clients' books on the tax basis. That is why we're not showing it as a loan, and we are showing it as a negative expense there. Now, remember, this is for those that have payroll, have wages that they're paying out. This right here that I just talked about doesn't apply to Schedule C or Schedule F because there is no tax adjustment for those. Now, when we're talking about the next item on the Schedule C, a lot of questions still on, well, how do I determine my forgiveness application amount? Okay, it's 2019 Schedule C, line 31, divided by 12 times 2.5. Boom. I'm going to put a link down there that says calculation of the self-employment PPP. So that's just a refresher on that. Seventh thing, getting a number of questions. What if you're a Schedule C, a sole proprietor, for 2020, but you now want to be an S Corp in 2021? How does that affect PPP forgiveness? Well, the adjustment for the Schedule C filer, that's the self-employed, or Schedule F, that's a 2020 item. That's a 2020 issue. No tax adjustment. By becoming an S Corp, it doesn't change the fact that there's still no tax adjustment for you. So when you become an S Corp 1/1/21, it's now moving forward. There won't be any tax adjustment just because you took your sole proprietorship to an S Corp in 2021. Now, I would say this, wait until PPP2 parameters are put out there. Make a determination once you know that. Do you want to be an S Corp in 2021? Don't let that be your only decision-making process or only factor. You do have until March 15th of 2021 to elect to be an S Corp for 2021. So hold tight in making that decision, but it won't have an effect if you change to an S Corp. The eighth item, self-employed is not an employee. Self-employed does not pay themselves payroll. You may call it payroll, you may treat it as payroll, you may think of it as payroll, you may have a separate account as a self-employed individual. From your personal account, you pull out money, whether it's on a regular basis or as needed, it's profits. Okay, it's not wages. So I've got a link that addresses that and walks through. So if you have a bank that's saying to you as a self-employed, send us your payroll information, probably another reason to just hold tight, wait, let the bank catch up with the rules and regulations related to this, because for the self-employed, you only give your Schedule C as your document for PPP forgiveness. You're not an employee. You don't have payroll to yourself. So go to the link on that where it says self-employed is not an employee, because I give you the finite detail in that video. I give you links to what the IRS says and the SBA says. You can forward that particular video to your bank on why it is that you're not in a position where you are having to pay yourself, because it's not even possible. Now, when you are talking about Schedule C and you are talking about the EIDL grant, you are going to reduce down your expenses in 2020 for the EIDL grant. You're not making an adjustment as a Schedule C filer or Schedule F for your PPP forgiveness, but you are reducing down your expenses as a Schedule C filer for your EIDL grant. Okay, hey, thanks for tuning in related to this. Packed a bunch into this. Stay tuned. For those of you that are looking for other videos, had a wonderful comment, and I really appreciate it, about, hey, I love the videos. Can't wait for some videos that are not related to PPP. So know this, over the Thanksgiving break, I'll be putting together a series of videos related to tax planning. I'm going to release them all at once, and most likely I'm going to release that under the new membership that you'll be able to join, if you will, different from subscribing, to then see those videos, because those are very more on point. They're not very popular for starters, but also I think that having it in a membership setting and having it in a playlist setting, you'll be able to follow it through, see it easier, versus as the video's coming out and you're trying to catch the videos as they're coming out. I know not all subscribers can watch all videos. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to have year-end tax planning talking about for the real estate investor, the investor, the small business owner, the self-employed, the S-Corp owner. I'm also going to have a series talking about the tax credits that we should be taking advantage of between now and the end of the year related to payroll. And there are tax credits for self-employed that I really haven't gotten into because we're not going to experience those until now, till tax time. But they're fairly sexy. They're going to add up, and especially as we're heading into some potential shutdowns, whether that's government mandated or you're having quarantine going on inside your company, and even for yourself as a self-employed, there's tax credits there that are going to be there to help you. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for sticking with me with all the PPP, the EIDL videos. Again, if you haven't subscribed, you made it to here. I know that I'm providing value. Do me a favor, click it, subscribe, turn on the notifications. Again, I'm putting together videos that help my clients and help you. All right, hey, thanks for tuning in. I'd love it if you'd subscribe. And then don't you ever forget, you've never met a CPA quite like me. Hey, I appreciate y'all very, very much. Thanks for listening.